Rabbi Dee, thank you so much. I'm sorry under these circumstances. Every time I'm with you, I feel a bit more comforted. I feel a bit more inspired, as hard as that is for you to hear. But when we spoke at the Jerusalem Theatre together, when we went to the Kikar Chatofim, when we went to the hostage space, and all we're going to do is thank you for being such a light and ray of hope in these difficult times, despite what you've been through. You've got an incredible career from VC to the rabbinate, but really a big part of what you are now is that symbol of hope. You lost your wife, you lost your 2 daughters in such a severe tragedy. And I'd like to ask you to take us back to that moment, April 7, 2023. What happened and how did you hear the news? Bring us back into that.
We were driving up to Tiberia for a holiday on the first day of Chol HaMoed, the Friday of Pesach. And we had 2 cars. Lucy was driving with Maia and Rina, and I was driving with Tali and Yehuda, and my other child, Karen, was spending the Shabbat in Jerusalem. We were pretty much neck and neck. Waze was directing us on the circuitous route around the mountains, and I chose to change the route to go straight up the 90. Lucy didn't. Half an hour after we passed that turning point, I get a call from someone else saying, there's been a terror attack on the road. Are you okay? So I said, we're okay, but I want to call Lucy. So I called Lucy, no answer. Called Maia, no answer. Called Rina, no answer. And I looked at Family Link, and I saw they were at the Hamra Junction where the terror attack had taken place. So my heart sank. I turned the car around. We started zooming down back to the Hamra Junction. Yehuda had Telegram, and he saw a photograph of the car. It had our swim bag on the back, covered in blood and bullet holes in it. We pretty much assumed that was what had happened.
That's while you're driving?
While we're driving. We continued. We got there. They wouldn't let us get near the car. They told us it wouldn't be good for us to see anything. We waited because I needed to have a full confirmation. And it was only when they brought Maia's ID card that I knew for sure, at which point I had to drive them back down to Jerusalem because they told me that Lucy had been airlifted to hospital.
And what is that drive like with your other children in that moment?
I think that because of the speed of everything happening, we were just completely on adrenaline. And the emotions didn't kick in. We were completely in action mode, and it was not as emotional as one would expect. We just, we knew we had to get to the hospital. We got there in time to see Lucy going in for an operation to remove a bullet from her brainstem and from her spine. The doctor said it went well, but I don't know what that means under the circumstances. And we ended up burying her on the Tuesday and the girls on the Sunday.
Do you remember when the emotion did hit in?
I didn't cry as much as people might expect because I felt that I had 14 million people crying for me. It was just incredible. Everybody I met at the Shiva, after the Shiva for months, if they saw me, they'd burst into tears. And it was quite comforting in some ways, but also quite strange. We really felt the love, but I felt strangely that I'd sort of outsourced the tears to Am Yisrael. And I found the best therapy for me and actually for the kids was to be very busy doing things that actually were inspiring us and in the memory of Lucy, Maia and Rina.
So you actually felt when Am Yisrael was coming forward, when the Jewish people were coming forward, that they were sharing a part of that load with you, crying with you and shouldering the burden?
Absolutely. I mean, I went to visit, with my daughter Karen, we went to visit some of the families from Be'eri in the Dead Sea Hotel. And we were blown away by the fact that how they were coping with this tremendous disaster that happened to their kibbutz. And we couldn't really understand how someone who'd lost, say, 2 members of their family was coping so well a week or 2 after the tragedy. And then it struck us that actually, whilst they might have a family of 6 and they lost 2 members, in fact, they were a family of 1,000. and they'd lost 2 members because the kibbutz was coming around as a massive family, and they felt this tremendous support from everybody. And we honestly felt that we had 14 million people in our family at that point, because everybody came around us, everybody was offering help in every possible way.
And how about your children? As a father to your other children, what advice have you given them? How have you parented them? And what message can we learn from that?
So at the Shloshim, after 30 days of mourning, I turned to my 3 kids, to Karen, to Talia, and to Yehuda, and I said, we are now in a new world. We were in world number 1, we had 2 parents and 5 kids. We're now in world number 2, 1 parent and 3 kids. It will be fun, we'll be happy. We have to move forward. We've had 30 days of suffering and pain and tears in between, but we have to move on. And
were they able to take that in?
It's taken us all time, and we're still working through it. But I think, as I say, what's happened is they've all started new programs. My son started boarding school. My daughter started midrashah. My oldest daughter is working for another year in a Beit Yeled. They're all full-time occupations. They're living out of the house, surrounded by friends and by love, and that's a tremendous gift.
And what gives you strength? What are you doing in your day? How do you keep going? Besides being busy, which I completely understand, what gives you that strength?
It's what I'm busy with. I felt that after the Shiva, I was surprised, but people continued to bombard me with WhatsApp requests to do this, to speak here, to speak there, to get involved in this project and that project, and meet. And I decided to quit my job at the time. I was a teacher. And I think it was the right thing to do, because I was a teacher, Lucy was a teacher, and we had a lot of time together actually in the afternoons. And had I gone back to that schedule, I would have just come back and seen an empty house, and I would have just been a constant reminder of what I was missing. So I quit, and I made myself very busy. Anyone asked me to do something, I would do it if I had the time. And I would come back at night, 11 o'clock at night, exhausted. And I was engaged in everything, projects really in the memory of the girls. Everything I do is dedicated to one of their characteristics. And in my mind, everything is very sort of ordered in that way.
Amazing. I'd love you to, obviously your wife, Lucy, such a tremendous person. You knew her in a different way to anyone else, obviously. Can you share a little bit about her? Who was she?
Right. So just one aspect of her name was Lucy, which means light. And when we went we invited her friends to her birthday on June, 3 months after the tragedy. And we asked her friends to talk about what was special about Lucy to them in their lives. And they all had one thing in common. They said she saw the light in their soul, and she encouraged them to bring it out. And when people ask me why I quit my job as a venture capitalist and the next day went off to Israel to become a rabbi, if you'd asked me that 9 months ago, I would have given you a very sort of self-serving, arrogant answer about how I saw the light and I wanted to change my life. And now I realize that actually it was all her, and she saw some potential for me to do something better than making money. And that's how we ended up in Israel.
Amazing. So through seeing the light in others, she indirectly but really directly helped you see the light yourself to be able to continue to illuminate.
Right.
So in that sense, you're continuing her legacy in everything you do.
Completely. And I think the kids, Baruch Hashem, have been very well prepared for this in a strange way by her, because she gave them tremendous strength, and she gave us all strength.
And tell us about Maia.
Maia's name, we named her the water of Hashem, because that connected to Torah. And she loved learning and teaching Torah. And everything I do now, which is connected to Torah learning, is really in her memory.
What was she like as a child growing up? What was her main character traits?
She was very friendly. She had very diverse groups of friends, and she started, get to the age she was about 19, she started mixing the groups of friends together. So she was really introducing people to each other, and she just was this lovely bubble of energy and love.
Sounds like it came in the family. And what about Rina?
Rina, one aspect of Rina, again, we invited their friends around for a Shabbat lunch after the Shloshim. And I went around the table asking them, what was special about Rina, what was unique about Rina. And one of them said, well, she went to Kiryat Arba, Ulpana, and they're not known for being particularly sort of peacenik there. A lot of people in Kiryat Arba, unfortunately, have lost family members through terror, so they tend to be rather anti-peace with the Arabs and anti-dialogue. And the girl said to me, a friend said to me, she was the only girl in Kiryat Arba who spoke out for peace with the Arabs. And I laughed, because I said every Shabbat we would have arguments over the Shabbos table where she would take a very right-wing perspective and I would take the opposite. And she would argue every possible argument against dialogue with the Arabs. And then turned out that she was using that in order to learn the argument so she could go back to school and she could send the other way. So that was, I think, tells you a lot about her personality.
Sure, and to see the overlap between the three personalities, but the focus and the profound difference that each have, shows the home that you and Lucy brought these children up really continue.
Baruch Hashem. So there are many, as I said, a lot of diverse characteristics, and that's enabled me to sort of really put a label on all the things I'm doing against one of them.
Yeah. And what's your message to the Jewish people at this time? You know, obviously the difficulty that you went through, and unfortunately too many people, so to speak, have become part of that bereaved family group, you know, and we've gone through October 7, and just like you said, April 6 was a different world for your kids to April 8. So to October 6, many senses, to October 8 for many people in this world. What's your message to the Jewish people at this time?
I would say that, just as you say, October the 7th, Simchat Torah, was the marking of a new world. And it's not coincidental that we opened the Sefer Torah and we read from the creation of the world in the beginning of Parshat Bereshit. And God's given us a gift because, as I say, reframing our lives and understanding that the world that we are in today is not the world that we were in then, both for those Jews living in Israel, for whom many have family members on the front, and for those Jews living outside of Israel who are watching people marching down the street saying, "Kill the Jews," in many different ways since October the 7th. We're in a new world. And I think there are many other signs that we're in a new world. We saw a Turkish politician, for example, drop dead after making a speech against Israel, like on the spot. We saw a speech from President Biden, like no speech has ever been made by any ruler in our lifetimes, and probably including Churchill. We saw, after October the 7th, the Air Force called up 100% of the reserves for the Air Force, expecting 60% to turn up because 40% were refusing, and 120% turned up because 20% said, "Why didn't you invite us as well?" So there are all these signs that something has changed, and I think we're in a new world.
How do we actively tap into that? You know, almost that was forced upon us. In 2024, hopefully we're going to see, you know, that world moving forward. How do we channel that positivity? How do we channel that special?
So I think that, as I said, one of the things that helped me, the thing that helped me most was actually being busy with activities that were meaningful to me and to the girls. And I think that every Jew today could find a project that they dedicate to the war effort, whether that is creating positive content for social media, whether that's helping the soldiers or the bereaved families, whether that's coming on a mission if they live outside of Israel, or many other different possibilities. And they should put time into that activity, and it will help them in those two ways. Number one, they will have less time sitting on their phones watching social media and being depressed by the stories they're seeing. And number two, when they think about what happened on October the 7th, and they look back in 10 years' time, and their children ask them, "Mummy, Daddy, what did you do when the Jewish people needed you?" they can say, "We did X, and we really made an impact." And I think that is something that everyone is being called to do at this point. We have to do something meaningful towards the war.
That's so true. I think one day, we're going to read the history books about this time, and we're going to ask ourselves, what did I do after in that new world? And I think, we always need to look at our lives in retrospect down the line. And every one of us want to be proud with what we decided to do.
I think we're at a tipping point of the world. And it's not coincidental that this is the 75th year of the Medina, the State of Israel, because 75 is 3 times 25, and 25 is one generation. So 3 generations in Jewish thought is permanence. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we're here forever. And God was telling us, stop introspecting. This is not about the Jewish people anymore, just the small group going down the streets with flags, complaining about legal reform one way or the other. That's not the point. The point is now you are the center of the world, microcosm of what's happening in the whole world. You have a different job. Interestingly enough, one could also argue that 14 million Jews in the world, 7.2 million in Israel, we've passed the tipping point of the majority of Jews living in Israel. So according to many of our poskim, that means that the requirement to live in Israel now is a biblical commandment. And we've moved from the state of Israel, Medinat Israel, to Eretz Israel, to the land of Israel, because now Israel to any Jew is of biblical significance. It's no longer just a political construct. It's actually a biblical construct.
So it's almost there were these quantitative milestones that pushed us over that edge, and then there was a qualitative shift, the paradigmatic shift, and we need to tap into that to be able to move forward. That's your message to the Jewish people and to the Jewish world. There's a broader audience, and we're seeing ourselves on the front stage of history of humanity, not just of the Jewish people. And I guess, after being through what you've been through as an educator, as a teacher, as a rabbi, what's your message to the broader world?
I think that what we're seeing out in the broader world is a phenomenon that we haven't seen so clearly for 1,000 years. They used to call it the blood libel. Today, it's something I refer to as anti-truth. We are being accused, Jewish people, of perpetrating crimes which are actually being perpetrated against us, which is really quite odd, because a lie is usually something that has an element of truth in it that's been blown out of proportion. And that we're used to, fake news. But something which completely takes the truth and turns it 180 degrees, I think it's only used against the Jews historically and certainly now. So they accuse us of being apartheid, but actually how many synagogues are there in Gaza? How many mosques are there in Tel Aviv? They accuse us of a genocide against them, but their numbers have grown exponentially in the last 75 years. And the only genocide that's actually taken place was on the 7th of October against 1,400 people sleeping in their beds, and so forth. So the question is, why do they do it? And here I have an answer. I'm sure somebody will come up with a better answer. But what I say is that if you have an inexperienced parent and two kids, Sally and Fred, and a chocolate bar is missing from the cupboard, so the parent says, who did it? And Sally says Fred did it, and Fred said Sally took it, and she'll send them both to bed without dinner. So one of them did very well, and one of them did very badly. And the one who did very well will come back next time and accuse the other one immediately of doing what they did. And the world is like an inexperienced parent, and we're being accused of things we haven't done, and we're always on the back foot. And so successful was this that the department that was responsible for the last 75 years of dealing with this in the Israeli government was called Misrad Hasbara, the Ministry of Explaining, that they would wait until they were accused of something they didn't do. And then they would have a whole team of people working on explaining why we didn't do it, and 10 weeks later there'd be a retraction in small letters at the bottom of the screen, and we were always minus. And that was our PR. So I think that one of the things that we have to be aware of as Jews is that we fall very easily into this trap. And it's happening in America at the moment. The anti-Semites are targeting our students, and we're spending too much time responding to it. Okay, they're distracting us from what we really need to be doing, which is shining the light of truth on the evils that are occurring around us, because there's plenty of evils happening around us, both with jihadism and the lack of human rights for Arabs, Muslims in the countries around us. To the extent that we are spending our time arguing fruitless arguments about why we have the right to exist, we're not actually engaging in what we really need to be doing, which is actually transforming the world into a better place. So
what should that message be then to the world? Once we got our act together and we're proactively putting out a message, what should the message be?
So that's a very good question. So what my dream is that there should be a worldwide movement for Israel's efforts during this war. There's a worldwide movement we all know about that's against us, which is Free Palestine. What would the movement have as its slogan? Which is interesting. Nobody's come up with a particularly good slogan yet. And marching against anti-Semitism is not going to bring tens of millions of people around the world onto the streets. I would suggest free Gaza from Hamas, and then maybe later free Lebanon from Hezbollah, free Iran from the Ayatollahs, and ultimately maybe free the world from jihad. But that I think is something which every person in the Western world should be interested in. And I think, sadly, if we don't do it, they're going to become more interested in that over time.
Wow. And what advice would you give all these people that have been through such terrible terror and their families? How should they be moving forward? And also, all of us that haven't directly but indirectly are feeling that trauma, want to be there for those people. What advice do you have?
I firmly believe that the best treatment for trauma, just from my own experience, and I may not be true for everybody, but certainly for myself and my kids, engage yourself in activities which are dedicated to the memories of those who were lost, and throw yourself into those projects and spend time doing it and put your passion into it. And as I say, that will help you fill up that time that you otherwise would be sitting and worrying about it. And number two, it will give you positive feelings about what happened. Strange enough, be able to look back at the lost ones with some feeling of joy almost. When I think about Lucy, Maia and Rina, I don't always cry now. Sometimes I actually feel proud and happy that I'm doing something meaningful because of them. And I think if we can get to that point, that is the greatest treatment, let's say, for trauma.
Are there any final anecdotes or messages you'd like to share?
I just think, I'm when I meet other families, bereaved families, I am tremendously impressed by their strength and their love of Am Yisrael. I think that I know the people that you've been interviewing today are very good examples, but I think the Jewish people, by definition, are really one soul in 14 million bodies. And when tragedies like this happen, that's when we see it in front of our eyes. And it's tremendous and energizing. And you realize that the Jewish people have a tremendous role to transform this world. And this is really a step in that process.
Rabbi Dee, I can't thank you enough for giving so much comfort to so many despite the tragedy that you've experienced yourself. And I just bless you that you have the capacity to continue to illuminate, to be a beacon of hope, and to continue to be really, someone that projects these messages that you're describing, because it's so authentic, it's so real, it's so heartfelt from you, and we all feel it. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.